Venice, winter of 1698. The city of masks and murky waters lay under a shroud of mist. For days, no sunlight touched its stone spires. Fog crept through the marble stairways, coiled under church domes, and blanketed the Santa Croce cemetery after 4 nights of flood and thunder. From the drowned ground, a coffin surfaced, marked, unsanctified. No cross, no name, only a seal of cracked red wax engraved with a broken spiral. Gravediggers refused to touch it. A priest, ancient and blind in one eye, broke the seal. Inside, no body, only a thick leather-bound book, stitched with what looked like blackened human sinew, tied shut with a string of rotted teeth. The first page bore a single line written in blood-browned ink. "I have returned, but not whole." For over 2 centuries, this manuscript remained buried in the forbidden archives of San Servolo. Scholars who dared to examine it dubbed it Codex ex Umbrath, the writ from the shadow. It claimed to be the diary of a man who had died, and yet lived again. Not resurrected in the manner of Christ or miracle, but awakened in a state neither dead nor living, a fractured existence. A half-man dragged back from the earth by something far older than memory. He never gives his name, calls himself only a scholar, once of the living. He lived alone, succumbed to fever, and was buried on the 12th night of January, 1694. By rites, by prayer, and by dirt, he was given to the earth. But beneath that earth, he did not sleep. "I awoke into darkness," he writes. "There was no pain, no time, only silence. Until it breathed." He claims his senses returned, piece by piece. A whisper under the soil, a pressure in his skull.
That air but presence.
Something pressed inward from without, a will, not his own. And then movement. His fingers bent, though he gave them no command. His ribs cracked open with a sound like drowned wood. He rose not from the grave, but through it. He wrote, "When I emerged from the soil, there was no light, only fog, only bells tolling in the far-off domes. No one saw me, because I no longer belonged to the world of the seen." He returned to the old house by the Cannaregio Canal, where he once wrote books on history and anatomy. The door was different. The air had changed. A young woman answered and paused when she saw him. "You look like the man in the portrait upstairs," she whispered. "He died years ago." He climbed the creaking steps and found it. A painting of himself, hanging where his study used to be. In it, his eyes were gently shut. Now, standing before it, his own eyes were open dry, unmoving. He took a room under a false name. By day he slept in silence. By night he wrote that he no longer hungered for food, nor thirsted for water. He did not breathe, yet remained. But there was something inside him, growing. "I did not return alone," he wrote. "Something came back with me. It has no shape, only sound, pulse that is not mine. It demands ... that I dig." Each night he was pulled back to the cemetery. His feet moved without will. He walked among the graves, drawn by whispers in a tongue he once knew, but no longer recognized. He unearthed his first corpse, a young woman, dead only days. When he opened the coffin, her eyes flickered. Her mouth moved, but no breath came. "I thought I had revived her," he wrote, "but no. I had only blurred the line." So began his second life. Each night he unearthed the dead, to awaken them, but to listen, to feel what lingered in their bones. They did not speak with tongues, but with impressions. Each time he touched the dead, they left something behind. Thought, a name, a scream. "I am no longer alone," he wrote. "They live in me now, not as ghosts, but as fragments. I carry them, and I cannot tell which thoughts are mine anymore." He was no sorcerer, no demon, Smut no longer human. He had become a vessel for the unresolved, a body repurposed, not by choice, but by invitation. And at the close of this entry, he scrawled one final line in red, rust-colored ink. "I've come too far to go back, but not far enough to forget who I was." There are many ways to lose oneself. Through madness, through grief, through the slow erosion of identity. But the most terrible, he wrote, is to be lost within oneself, when your thoughts are no longer yours, and your skin is no longer home. The entries in the diary began to change. The ink grew uneven. The handwriting trembled as if penned by different hands. Sentences broke mid-thought, then resumed in unfamiliar tone. Some paragraphs seemed written in languages lost to time, Latin twisted by something older. Slavic words fused with symbols of plague-era alchemy. "They are not merely voices," he wrote. "They are echoes of lives. Lives I did not live, but now remember as if I had." He began to dream, though he no longer slept in the human sense. In these visions, he was no longer the scholar. He was a soldier on a blood-soaked field outside Prague, throat slit by a blade of his own making. He was a midwife who bled out in childbirth in a plague-swept village near. He was a child locked beneath floorboards during a fire, nails torn as he scratched for breath. "I dream their deaths," he confessed, "and then I wake." And they continued to speak. By the end of the second month, he no longer referred to himself in the singular. "We," he wrote. "We do not understand what we have become." He ceased to eat, not out of asceticism, but because the bodies inside him did not know hunger. Yet he consumed in other ways. He read feverishly ancient texts, forbidden manuscripts stolen from the libraries of monks who had gone blind. One entry describes a book bound in human skin, inked with the ashes of the dead, titled Only Contra Vita. He wept when he touched it, not from fear, but recognition. "We remember this," he wrote, "though we do not know how. It called to us before we were born." Soon, his own reflection began to betray him. He would catch glimpses in glass and still water faces not his own, eyes that blinked when his remained open. One night, while passing a storefront window, he saw the face of a child he did not know, staring back, mouthing the word, "Help." He began sealing mirrors in cloth, no longer walked by canals, but it did not stop the visions. They came from inside now. He described a moment, chilling in its simplicity. He reached to scratch his arm, and felt another hand pushing from beneath his skin. Not metaphor, flesh rising, moving independently. Bone shifting, then subsiding, as if ashamed of being seen. "I am the house," he wrote, "and they are my guests. But some have overstayed, some ... want more." He could no longer stay in Venice. The city, once a maze of comfort and familiarity, now echoed with the footsteps of those only he could hear. Bells rang at wrong hours. Statues turned to face him. A blind beggar spat at his feet and hissed, "You walk with the drowned." So he fled. North, toward the Black Forest, where silence had roots deeper than memory. There, among rotting pine and abandoned monasteries, he found what he called the Hollow Abbey, a ruin lost to time with no records, no pilgrims, only cold wind and the scent of iron. It was here the voices quieted, not because they had left, but because something greater silenced them. "It lives beneath the abbey," he wrote, "and it remembers me." The ground pulsed when he stepped near the broken altar. Candles refused to stay lit. He descended into the crypt, drawn by something vast and ancient and waiting. A door carved into stone, older than the church itself, sealed by a symbol he had once seen, the broken spiral. And there, carved in Latin, worn by centuries, "To speak with the dead is to become their tongue." In that place, he made his first offering. He did not say what it was, only that it weighed more than bone, and that when he left the Hollow Abbey, he walked lighter but less human. The final line of this entry is written in a dozen hands. "We are not one." And the hunger grows. The Hollow Abbey did not rest, not as men rest. Its silence was not sleep, but a kind of listening. The walls groaned with memory. The air was thick with breath that did not come from lungs. Down there, time unraveled, daylight vanished, clocks stopped ticking. He wrote that he no longer knew if he had spent 7 days or 70 years beneath its stones. The entries in his journal turned strange, ink-smeared. Letters grew tangled, symbols replaced words. The same mark appeared again and again. A spiral, broken at the center, branching into tendrils like roots or veins. He no longer spoke of himself as I, but as we. "We are becoming," he wrote. "Or perhaps we are remembering what we once were." His skin grew thin, almost translucent. Beneath it, shadows moved faces, faint and flickering, rising like bubbles through water. At times he would catch them staring back at him from his own hands. When he spoke, the voice was layered his, and then others beneath, whispering the same words in different tongues. But strangest of all, he was calm. The terror that once clawed inside him was now quiet. The voices that screamed had found order. No longer prisoners, they were priests, and he had become their temple. "They wear me," he wrote, "and in return they carry me closer to truth." That truth arrived in the form of a woman. She came barefoot, wearing black robes, woven with strands of ash. Her mouth was sewn shut, but she spoke clearly inside his mind, not in words but in visions. She carried a book bound in white leather. On its cover, the spiral, whole and pulsing. She handed it to him. He opened it. But the pages were not written in ink. They were filled with memories. Not his, but others. The last breaths of forgotten souls. A child drowned in a convent well. A monk who swallowed fire rather than speak the words he had heard in a dream. A midwife buried alive beneath the floorboards of a burning hospital. He felt them all. And he wept not from sorrow, but from familiarity. He had known these lives, in pieces, in flashes, in nightmares. The woman said nothing, but her meaning was clear. "You were the last gate," and then she vanished. He returned to Venice. But Venice did not welcome him. The city recoiled. Dogs barked without reason. Candles flickered out when he passed. The bells of San Marco rang at the wrong hour. Statues turned their heads. Children cried without knowing why. He stepped into his old house. The floor groaned under his feet, not from weight, but from memory. Mirrors shattered. The walls bent away from him. He no longer cast a shadow. That night he opened the white book again, and it wrote itself, in blood not his, but drawn from the hands that had once belonged to others. The ink described instructions, rites, names, objects that needed to be found. He became a collector, not of artifacts, but of echoes. He found a violin that had played at a mass funeral and had never made sound again, candle melted by the breath of a dying priest, a doll pulled from the coffin of a child buried alive. Each object trembled in his hands, each one whispered when placed beside the book, and then the final revelation. He was not meant to raise a single person, not a body, not a soul, but an entire city. They buried it, he wrote, under stone and water. Beneath Venice, an older city waits, not made of brick and marble, but of blood, ash, and forgotten names. The last words of that entry were not written by his hand. They were burned into the parchment in letters that shimmered like coal, were coming through him. The resurrection did not begin with thunder or light. It began with rot. The Grand Canal grew still, heavy with a silence that pressed against the skin. Gondoliers refused to row past the old abbey ruins. Rats abandoned entire districts. In the crypts beneath San Zaccaria, the corpses began to hum a low vibration that cracked marble and summoned clouds of flies. Only he knew what it meant. "It wakes," he wrote, "and through me, it stretches its limbs." The objects he had gathered, each a relic of sorrow, were placed in a circle beneath the hollow abbey, not arranged, but remembered. Each item pulsed with its own rhythm. The doll twitched. The violin wept resin. The melted candle flickered to life, though no flame touched it. And he no longer fully man, no longer merely vessel stood in the center. He removed the final barrier, his own skin, not with blade or fire, but with will. "To become the gate, I must be without walls," he had written. The transformation was not violent. It was surgical, silent. His flesh unfolded layer by layer, revealing not bone, but memory. Not organs, but voices. Beneath his ribs, an ancient language glowed, etched into wet tissue. From his spine, tendrils unfurled, connecting him to the artifacts, to the room, to the dead city below. And then Venice remembered. Streets cracked. Wells overflowed with ink-black water. Bells rang without hands. The lagoon receded, revealing cobblestones not seen in 1,000 years. Beneath them, ruins that predated maps. Columns marked with spirals, altars stained with salt and bone, and a name whispered by the wind. Vidralis, the drowned city, is the one that came before. A place erased from records by flood, fire, and fear. A city that had once spoken to the dead not in prayer, but in pact. Now it rose. The sky turned gray as ash. Every window in Venice shattered outward. Statues bled from the eyes. And from beneath the abbey, a chime, a single note, sung not by voice, but by stone, rang out, deep and mournful. He had done it. He had opened the gate. And through him they came, not as demons, not as gods, but as reminders. Shapes that did not obey bone or shadow. Faces stitched from centuries. Some walked on all fours. Some floated without eyes. Some were simply voids in the shape of those we once loved. All of them hungry not for flesh, but for remembrance. Because to be forgotten, he wrote, is a kind of death. And now they had returned to be known again. The final pages of the diary were not written by hand. They appeared over time, bleeding slowly into the parchment, some written backward, others in spirals. One page simply repeated, "We were, we are, we will be." And in the very last entry, dated a day that does not exist, one final line, "He walks among you still, but not in one piece." The book was found years later, sealed in glass and wax, buried beneath a burned chapel near the Venetian outskirts. The man who found it died within a week. His body collapsed inward, as if trying to escape itself. No cause was listed. The book now rests in a locked vault beneath the Vatican, catalogued under a false name. Scholars who've read it whisper of dreams they cannot shake, dreams of cities where no sun shines, of voices speaking from mirrors, and of a gate, always open, never found. And if you walk the quiet alleys of Venice at night, some swear they hear footsteps echoing behind them, not in pursuit but in reminder, as if something wants you to remember what you were never supposed to know.